Hey, greetings from New Hampshire, where our state motto is live free or die. Good to be with. Oh, wait a minute. You guys have all paid a ton of money to be at a big swank event tonight. The least I could do is dress for the occasion. So enough of the New Hampshire national dress. Live free or die. I'm honored to be here and to speak on behalf of Andrew Bolt. Not because I always see eye to eye with Andrew. In fact, he attacked me over something or other a couple of years back. Can't remember what the hell it was now. It's amazing how quickly these things fade away if you don't bring the courts into it. What Andrew's undergoing is something very familiar to me because it happened to me in Canada when I fell afoul of the tolerance enforcers and diversity compliance regulators in the same way that Andrew has. So I see him as the Mark Steyn of Australia. If that sounds like damning with faint praise, well, during my own troubles, Brigitte Bardot got convicted in France of offending Islam. And I was listening to a radio report over here trying to put the story in context. And the host said, basically, Brigitte Bardot is the Mark Steyn of France, unquote. And, I know she's getting a bit long in the tooth, but I thought that was frankly uncalled for. If you'd held a competition for a combination of words that the English language would never, ever have any conceivable use for, Brigitte Bardot is the Mark Steyn of France would be a shoo-in for the top three. So if it's any consolation to Andrew, you're not just the Mark Steyn of Australia, you're the Brigitte Bardot of Melbourne. Why is this happening? Because in some of the oldest free societies on the planet, we've entirely corrupted the concept of human rights. It's not very difficult. Human rights are rights for humans, rights for individuals. Back in 1215, Magna Carta Libertatum, to give it its full title, couldn't have made it plainer. Real human rights are restraints that the people place upon the king. We understood that 8 centuries ago. Today, we've entirely perverted and corrupted the principle. We're undermining real human rights like freedom of speech and replacing them with ersatz rights that, rather than restraining the king, give him vastly increased state power to restrain the rights of his subjects. It's an abomination and it's explicitly Orwellian because these new rights are not handed out equally, but in different ways and to different degrees according to which approved identity groups you fall into. Orwell in Animal Farm. All animals are equal, but some animals are more equal than others. That's the system we've erected in Australia, in Europe, in North America. If you belong to privileged groups, the state affords you rights it does not extend to others. The British Columbia Human Rights Tribunal held a week-long trial of my writing, including a day devoted to the, quote, tone of my jokes, for which they flew in expert witnesses from Philadelphia and Toronto. Having made themselves a laughingstock in that case, the tribunal decided to go one better just a couple of weeks ago and fine a stand-up comedian $15,000 for his put-down of 2 hecklers. Unfortunately for him, they were hecklers of the lesbian persuasion, and so his put-downs were deemed homophobic. If Andrew and I had been heckling him and he'd been equally abusive to us, we'd have had no grounds for going to court because we're not members of any identity group enjoying collective rights. Neither Andrew nor I are lesbian. Well, I'm not. I wouldn't want to speak for Andrew, and frankly, it would be a good career move for him right now. Old joke. How many lesbians does it take to put out the lights on core Western liberties? Surprisingly few. In Britain, only the other day, Simon Ledger was singing oldies at the Driftwood Beach Bar and happened to be in the middle of warbling Kung Fu Fighting, #1 in Australia, September 1974, as I'm sure I don't need to inform a scholarly audience such as yourselves. In the middle of Kung Fu Fighting, 2 passers-by, not even patrons of the bar in question, chanced to overhear his rendition. They were Chinese, so they reported Mr. Ledger to the Isle of Wight police, who arrested him for racism. If I decide to sing Kung Fu Fighting to Andrew Bolt, he has to suck it up and take it, even if I do the extended dance remix, because he doesn't belong to a designated identity group. So we now have the situation where a joke or a song is a criminal act according to whom you perform it in front of. It's not merely ridiculous, it strikes at the heart of one of the bedrock principles of justice, equality before the law. It is tempting at this dark hour to recall the words of Pastor Martin Niemöller long ago in Nazi Germany. Quote, "First they came for the guys who sing Kung Fu Fighting, and I did nothing, because frankly I was never into disco and I still have painful memories of when I snagged the top of my afro on the glitter ball in 1977. In an ideal world, kung fu fighting is not the last hill on which I would have chosen to defend Western liberty. But the diversity enforcers started this fight, so come and get me, you pansies. All together now. Everybody was kung fu fighting. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da. Those cats were fast as lightning. Dee-dee-da-da-da-da-da. In fact, it was a little bit frightening. In fact, it is a little bit frightening. And it's happening as fast as lightning. In the United Kingdom, in Canada, in the Netherlands, in Austria, in Scandinavia, and now in Australia. If the state creates a human right to be offended and extends it only to members of certain interest groups, it is quite naturally incentivizing membership in those interest groups. So how we define the criteria for membership is a legitimate subject for public discourse. That's what Andrew was talking about, and that's what he has every right to talk about. One of the great strengths of common law has been its general antipathy toward group rights, because the ultimate minority is the individual. The minute you have collective rights, you require dramatically enhanced state power to mediate the hierarchy of different victim groups. It's not only expensive, it's preposterous. For example, Iqbal Sakrani. Iqbal Sakrani is a Muslim of such exemplary moderation, he's been knighted by the Queen. Sir Iqbal, the head of the Muslim Council of Britain, was on the BBC and expressed the view that homosexuality was, quote, immoral, not acceptable, spreads disease, and damaged the very foundations of society, unquote. A gay group complained, and Sir Iqbal was investigated by Scotland Yard's Community Safety Unit, which deals with hate crimes and homophobia. Independently, but simultaneously, the magazine of Gala, the Gay and Lesbian Humanist Association, called Islam a, quote, balmy doctrine growing like a cancer and deeply homophobic, unquote. In return, the London Race Hate Crime Forum asked Scotland Yard to investigate Gala for Islamophobia. You got that? If a Muslim says that Islam is opposed to homosexuality, he gets investigated for homophobia. But if a gay says that Islam is opposed to homosexuality, he gets investigated for Islamophobia. Two men say exactly the same thing, and they're investigated for different hate crimes. On the other hand, they could have sung kung fu fighting back and forth all day long to each other, and it wouldn't have been a crime unless a couple of Chinese passers-by walked into the room. I'm phobia-phobic. I don't want the state regulating a hierarchy of phobias between different interest groups. The lights are going out on core Western liberties, one light at a time, one cartoonist at a time, one novelist at a time, one filmmaker at a time, and one newspaper columnist at a time. I offer Andrew and the rest of you one bit of advice from my experience. I'm happy to argue with anyone, debate with anyone, thwack the ball across the net for the full 5 sets. But the minute you demand the intervention of state power to criminalize my opinion, the issue is not my opinions, but yours. Andrew's views on Aboriginals, mine on Muslims, the nightclub comics on lesbians, the disco singers on Chinese people, that's not in the dock. The onus is on you, the accuser, to justify your demand that state power constrain, shrivel, and ultimately shut down opinions of which it does not approve. Anyone can be in favor of free speech for Barney the dinosaur and the Wiggles. But if you're not in favor of free speech you find offensive and repellent and loathsome, you're not in favor of free speech at all, and you're on the side of creeping totalitarianism. Too many of the official enforcers of tolerance use all the touchy-feely buzzwords as a cover. State-mandated diversity turns out to mean conformity, and no self-respecting individual should want any part of that. So I stand with Andrew Bolt because he represents the most beleaguered identity group in the Western world today, a freeborn citizen asserting his right to the most basic liberties of all. As they say here, live free or die. Go, Andrew!